It has been reported that your government will seek $2 billion in rent from the U.S. for the Philippine bases. Is this an accurate report?
No, it is not. We have never talked about figures.
Louder and clearer. We can understand the question.
The question was, is it correct that we have demanded $2 billion in the rent? The answer is no. We haven't quoted any figure. What we have asked is this. We want a study. What is it that is necessary in order that we can perform our job? You and I know that if the Philippines is attacked, the United States is not necessarily bound to immediately react because the provision of the Mutual Defense Pact is that you will immediately take steps as is necessary to meet the contingency in accordance with your constitutional processes. What does that mean? That means that you go to the Senate and the House of Representatives. What does that mean? That means delay while we are dying there.
Most of our allies in Europe, concerned about resisting communism, give the U.S. free bases and even share the cost. Why shouldn't we expect the same kind of cooperation from the Philippines instead of demands for more rent?
Well, for one thing, you haven't exactly paid for what we lost in the last war. If we must make an accounting, 75% of our cities were devastated in the last war. We lost 1 million men. Shall I quote you the statements of Roosevelt and MacArthur that every Carabao will be paid for? Shall I tell you that the veterans who were inducted into the USAFE, the United States Armed Forces of the Philippines, of the Far East, your armed forces, were paid only 1/2 the salary of your soldiers? Shall I tell you that we almost turned communists because you refused to recognize us? Shall I tell you that I had a difficult time stopping my guerrillas, 25,000 of them from joining the communists, because precisely you sort of forgot that we had done the fighting for you, you know, and we were parts of your armed forces. But in fairness to the American Congress, when we came here and we called attention to the fact that we had been abandoned and forgotten, they themselves in outrage immediately passed a law recognizing the services of the Filipino and reinstating them as parts of the United States Armed Forces in the Far East, including back pay and benefits. That, Madam President, is the answer, in addition to the fact that those people that you are talking about have been making money at the expense of the United States for quite a long time, while we have not.
After the attack on Pearl Harbor, U.S. bases in the Philippines could not be defended. Why should we expect that in another war these bases would be more reliable?
That's one of the questions that I wanted to find out.
I'm walking on a tightrope, actually. I cannot afford to be brave in the mouth against China because, well, we are avoiding any confrontation, a confrontation that would lead to something which we can hardly afford, at least not at this time. Kaya ako naman sa Amerika, well, in the past, marami silang ang paghihinakit ko rin. We ask so much of them because they have taken so much from us. libre sila to advance their troops in our land. Okay lang yan sa akin. But we do not like it because we want to remain neutral. We do not want to quarrel with anybody. But for the reason is that the exigency of the moment requires their presence here. Okay na lang ako dyan. But in the past, we ordered so much from them and so much were not delivered at all. Kaya huwag ninyo ako, kaibigan ako ng Amerika, kaibigan ako ng China. But what I don't like is yung para kang bata na they promise you and ganon yan eh. Mapunta yung mga top brass nila, this group will promise you. Once they take off, they forget all about it. And nobody is following until you keep on reminding them. Until such time that I was able to talk to President Trump, sinabi niya what are our requirements. So we need the guided rockets. We have been asking for it. And as a matter of fact, we are willing to pay for it, Mr. President. But until now, it's still in the air. I think it was delivered after a few weeks, few months. Kaya ganon, do not be surprised with my... I'm not allied with anybody. I am ally. I'm ally. Ialay ko, buhay ko, pati ang alay ko, ang Pilipinas. Nobody else. Iyon ang tandaan ninyo. Kung marinig niyo ako, it's the game here is geopolitics. The theater is really geopolitics. So ako naman, I'm just hold on my salita ko, not really to seriously offend. But sinasabi ko sa kanila na hindi pwede ito. I would like to put on notice if there's an American agent here that from now on, you want the visiting forces agreement done? Well, you have to pay. It's a shared responsibility. But your share of responsibility does not come free. Because after all, when the war breaks out, we all pay. You, kami, we're nearest to the garrison. There were a lot of arsenals of the Chinese armed forces. Yun lang, kaya makita mo minsan suplado talaga ako. When I deal with them, talagang nagiging suplado ako. Simply because of past and the pinaka-past. Until now, kung hindi mo makausap mong presidente, dito ngayon wala akong, I don't expect anything. It's different when it is the Republican and a Democrat. A Democrat, yung migration, they're allowing migration left and right. But that is their problem. Ang Amerika naman is war hawks talaga sila. But at least, inaano tayo. Nilalagay lang sa back burner yung mga samaan ng loob. So when the opportunity came and I talked to President Trump, sabi ko talaga sa kanya, we're hoping for that, we've been promised, and until now, it's still kaput. And I hope that the Americans would take notice of that. That their nearest possible inconvenient outpost would really be the Philippines, the eastern side, and Palawan. Kaya tandaan nila yan. I hope they would understand that we are nearest to a theater of war. Ang banatan dyan, it could be submarines and aircraft carriers and all. Madadamay talaga tayo. I do not want to participate in any adventure of that kind, if I can help it. I am not against the Chinese, neither am I, hindi ako pro-American. I am just a Filipino government worker working for the interest of my country.
Natatandaan nyo si Senador Lacson. Napagsabihan ni Presidente na kung maaari lang, itong si Senador Lacson, dahil hindi naman siya abogado, na pwede rin patawarin niya. Dahil nagsabi ni Senador Lacson, yung mga salita mo, Presidente, dapat huwag ganyan. Diplomasya lang tayo. Kasi parang lumalabas, extortionist tayo. Although, medyo binawi niya naman yon. Sinabi niya na lang na tama naman daw, kaya lang diplomatically. Ito naman si BP Leni, sumakay na rin. Sinabi, nalalabas na extortionist tayo. Kaya sabi ni Presidente, tandaan nyo ang saligang batas. Sinasabi ako ang chief architect. Kaya ibig sabihin, huwag niyong akong pakialaman. Sinagot ulit siya ni Presidente. Ito. Sinabi siya ni Ping Lacson. Sabi ni Senador Ping Lacson, Mr. President, may I respectfully remind you to read Section 7, Article 21 of the Constitution. Na nakalagay doon, yung mga tratado, kailangan dumaan sa aming na Senado para magkaroon ng conference. Kaya meron pwede akong makialam dyan. Pagtungkol dyan sa usaping yan. Alam po ninyo, I am amused, totally amused. Because Senator Ping Lacson, not being schooled in law and not being a lawyer, has the gumption and the temerity to lecture on this President, Rodrigo Roa Duterte, who is a learned and educated man in the art of law. He's trained. And not only he was trained there, he practiced it. He was a prosecutor. Magaling na abogado. Pagkatapos, nilecturean siya ng isang Senador Ping na hindi naman nakakuha ng abogasiya. Hindi naman naggraduado. O hindi ba? Ikaw naman. Tawa ka naman. Anyway, since you are not a lawyer, Senador Ping, kaya nga sabi ni Presidente, I can forgive you, you're not being a lawyer. Ako naman, expectedly and unsurprisingly, since you are treading in an unfamiliar terrain, natural, magiging mali yung narrative mo. So let me, with due respect to you also, educate you on the niceties of the law. Yung sinasabi mong Section 7, Article 21, on the concurrence of the Senate on the treaty, tama ka doon, pero mali yung application mo. Bakit ka mo? Itong BFA is already a treaty that has already passed the concurrence of the Senate. Ina-abolish na nga Madalit sabi, existing ito, kaya hindi applicable. Yung Section 7, Article 21 refers to treaties that will be entered into by the President, which has to pass through the Senate for your concurrence as members thereof. Kung baga, ang punto ni Presidente, teka muna, ako nga ang chief architect eh. Dumidiskarte ako. Nagnanavigate ako sa karagatan. Huwag niyo munang sirain ang diskarte ko. Kung ano man ang ginagawa ko ngayon, meron akong dahilan at meron akong gustong likhaing kalakaran. Pareho, without even saying it, but I'm the one saying it, yung ginawa niya dun sa Balinggiga na sinasabing mali, dapat diplomatiko yung pamamaraan. O kung diplomatiko, walang mangyayari sa atin. Hindi ba? Ilang dekada na nating pinababalik yung Balinggiga girls, Balinggiga bells na kinuha nila. Hindi naman nila binalik. Sa madalit sabi, hindi naging effective yung yung ating pakiusap. Kaya anong ginawa ni Presidente? Kung hindi ka madala sa santong dasalan, di sa santong paspasan, o di nag-golpe di gulat siya, o ano nangyari, o di ba nakabalik agad after a few months. Ganon din yan, ang sinasabi ni Presidente sa mga Amerikano, oy kayo, matagal na ninyong ginamit ang aming bansa. Sunod-sunuran kami sa inyo. Pinangako nyo sa amin ang langit at lupa, ang buwan. Wala namang nakarating. Kung baga, pipitsugin ang mga binigay nyo sa aming aid. Pero kung titingnan mo, yung ibang bansa na ginamit ninyo, milyon-milyong dolyares. Kami, gusto pa nga namin sa inyong bumili nung ilang 2 taon na nakakaraan ng mga armas, hindi nyo kami pinagbilihan. Kasi sabi nyo, hindi pa pwede namin benta sa iyo kasi ginagamit mo yung laban sa mga kababayan mo ng mga terorista at mga rebelde. Sus Maria Jose, biro mo yung dahilan na yun. Madalit sabi, we have received the short of it in every agreement that we entered into. Palagi tayong on the receiving end. Nagagamit lang tayo. Kung baga, inabot na yung pasensya ng presidente ito. Kaya iba ang estilo niya na ngayon. Kaya kung maaari, sabi niya, huwag niyo muna pakialaman. Pero pwede kayong makialam. Ako na ako nagsasabi sa inyo. Kailan kayo pwede makialam? When there is a treaty to be submitted to you by the President, that's the time you make your own voices of dissent, of disagreement, of your outrageous whatever. Pwede na lahat yan. Not at this time. Kasi nga, dumidiskarte siya. Kailangan niya ng suporta ng lahat. Kasi, pag ang estilo po ninyo, sisiraan nyo, di gagamitin ng kalaban, di talo na kagad tayo. Sasabihin niya, mga senador mo, ayaw sa mga sinasabi mo O hindi ba? O di, nawala na yung ating halaga. Kung baga sa poker, sa Lucky 9, pinasisilip mo na yung kartada mo sa kalaban Hindi po pwede yun. Antayin yung marating sa inyo sa Senado, sa kayo mo. At this time, let us support this president. Kasi meron naman siyang punto. Sabi ko nga, Senador Ping, tama naman siya. Mali lamang yung diplomasya. Huwag niyo nang hayaan nyo na yung diplomasya. Yung diplomasya, yung sinasabi rin ni Senador Dick Gordon na meron siyang Secretary of Defense, Secretary of Foreign Affairs na gamitin yun Senador Dick. By the way, tayo po nakikiramay sa pagpano ng iyong kapatid na si James Gordon Sr., dating kongresista, dati ng mayor ng Olongapo. Pero yung kung sinasabi nyo, dun sa gamitin ni Presidente, Secretary of Defense Lorenzana, Secretary Teddy Bullock-Sin, sa diplomasya sa baba, yun ay ginagawa na. Pero alam niyo si Presidente, meron na sa baba, meron pa sa taas. Kaya, kasi nakikita niya po yung diplomasya, kung gano'n ang estilo niya, hindi pinapakinggan. Kita niyo, nag-usap sila ni President Trump. pinangako rin sa kanya. Daming kung ano nung pinangako, wala rin nangyari. So kaya ngayon, style balanggiga. Gusto niyo gamitin ang aming bansa, magbayad kayo. Pero hindi yung pera, actually. Dapat ka pera kasi mo ibang bansa, pera ang hiningi. Yung sinasabi niya, yung mga kailangan namin equipment, whatever na kailangan namin, ibigay niyo sa amin. Hindi po ba? Kaya hayaan na po natin muna si President. Kaya, ang pakiusap lang naman po natin, ako mangingiusap. Naiintindihan ko naman na yun namang mga pahayag nyo for our own good. Siyempre, sincere naman kayo. Kaya lang, alam mo, sabi nga ng kasabihan on the way to hell, punong-puno ng sincere intentions. Di po ba? Kaya, anong ngayon ang pakiusap? Medyo maging prudent din ho tayo. If you're asking the President to be prudent, with more reason that you, as members of the Senate, should be more prudent than the President. Kasi siya ang dumidiskarte. Kung baga, mga meron lang tayo sa ngayon. O saka na tayo, pag nakarating na sa inyo, saka kayo bumanat. Hindi po ba? Suportahan muna natin siya. Dahil yun naman mga nakaraan niya, nagpapakita na magaling. Magaling ang mga diskarte niya. Hindi po ba? Kinilala nga siya, bilib na bilib nga sa kanya yung premier ng Prime Minister o Presidente ng Russia. Bilib sa kanya Presidente ng China. Maraming bumilib sa kanya kita mo si Obama, walang binatbat sa kanya. Talagang binanata niya. Kung baga, alam niyo, yung provision sa Constitution, sinasabing, not only is he the commander-in-chief, he's also the head of the state and head of government. And the Constitution precisely tells that the primary function of a government or the purpose is to serve and to protect the people. Yun nga ang ginagawa niya. Serving and protecting the people. Kaya, tingnan ninyo lahat ng galaw ni President. Whether to respond to illegal drugs, to criminality, to terrorism, to rebellion, to responses to this pandemic, in relation to foreign relations. Hindi ba napapansin? Palaging interest ng sambayanan, pinagsisilbihan niya at binibigyan niya ng protection. O hindi ba, gusto lang mga kritiko, lusog tayo dyan sa South China Sea. Teka muna. Kayo naman. Hindi natin kaya yan. Nandiyan na yung arbitral ruling, forever na yan, di mawawala yan. Meanwhile, tingnan natin yung bang aspeto ng lipunan. Baka kaya natin gamitin. Baka yung sharing of intelligence, baka yung sharing of defenses laban sa terorismo, sa rebellion, sa kriminalidad, sa droga, tayo pwede magtulungan doon. Yung arbitral ruling, nandyan na yan, forever and ever na yan, as in ever. Hindi mawawala yan. O yun lang naman.